My daughter-in-law laughed. Didn't expect you to come crawling back. Inside my own penthouse. Still, I didn't flinch. I just walked past her and placed the original deed on the table. As her smile stalled, the marble under her heels suddenly looked colder, like it remembered me. While she checked her phone for proof she never had, I traced my name in ink. The same name that paid for every inch of this place, still carved into the title. That's when I knew. Her mockery was temporary. My ownership was forever. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The hallway of the Ocean View Towers gleamed like it remembered her. Polished marble, mirrored walls, the faint smell of salt and lemon cleaner. It was the same luxury she once paid for, the same silence she used to own. Janet Brooks adjusted the strap of her leather tote, her hand trembling just slightly, and pressed the doorbell of what was still, legally and otherwise, her penthouse. The chime barely faded before the door opened. Kelsey stood there in a silk robe the color of champagne, hair perfectly waved, lips painted like she'd been expecting paparazzi. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said, leaning against the frame, "didn't expect you to come crawling back." Janet's gaze didn't flicker. She took in the woman her son had chosen, expensive but hollow. "Crawling isn't my style," Janet said softly. Behind Kelsey, Ethan appeared. He was barefoot, hair tousled, phone still in hand. "Mom," he said, voice low and uncertain, like he'd forgotten what to call her in this setting. "Hey, welcome back." The word back hung in the air, heavier than anyone intended. Then, a smaller voice cut through it. "Hi, Grandma." Layla peeked from behind the hallway wall, wearing mismatched socks and a shy grin that reminded Janet of the boy Ethan used to be. The sight softened the steel around her heart for half a second. "Hi, sweetheart," Janet said, her voice warmer now. "You've grown." Kelsey's tone sharpened immediately. "She's 9. Kids do that." She pulled the robe tighter. "We weren't expecting visitors." "I noticed," Janet said, stepping over the threshold without asking. Her heels clicked against new flooring, white oak instead of the dark mahogany she'd chosen years ago. The air smelled different too, perfumed and artificial. The living room looked like a magazine spread for people who never actually sat down. Every trace of her husband, was gone. The antique chest replaced with mirrored furniture. Her framed photographs vanished. Even the old rug that had survived hurricanes and spilled wine had been replaced with a pale, soulless substitute. Kelsey followed her in, smiling as if to narrate. "We made it our style, lighter, cleaner, fresher. You know, modern families need a little breathing room." Janet turned, her expression unreadable. "And the piano?" "Oh, that old thing? Sold. It took up too much space." Ethan busied himself with his phone again, pretending to scroll. Layla watched from a distance, sensing the undercurrent even if she didn't understand it. Janet let her fingers trail along the edge of the new marble countertop. "Everything looks very temporary," she said finally. Kelsey blinked. "I think you mean tasteful?" Janet gave a polite smile, the kind that could slice glass. "Of course." The silence that followed felt like the still air before a thunderstorm. Kelsey folded her arms, clearly expecting Janet to explain herself, to say she was visiting, or needed something, or had nowhere else to go. But Janet said nothing. She just looked around as if reacquainting herself with the details of a place that had been hers long before anyone else's name got attached to it. Layla tugged at her father's sleeve. "Can Grandma stay for dinner?" Ethan looked at Kelsey, then at Janet. We can order something?" Kelsey cut him off. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I mean, I'm sure your mother has a hotel booked, right?" Janet turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view stretched over Biscayne Bay, sun melting into the horizon like gold on glass. It was the same view she and her late husband used to toast to every anniversary. "No hotel," she said quietly. "I'm home." Kelsey's laugh was sharp. "Home? That's adorable." She set her hand on her hip, amused. "Ethan, tell her we've settled things. We have a lease, a mortgage. Everything's in place." Ethan's throat bobbed. He didn't speak. Janet looked back at her daughter-in-law with an expression so calm it was almost cruel. "I'm sure you believe that." Layla's eyes darted between the adults, unsure whom to trust. Janet picked up a framed print on the side table, some minimalist art Kelsey had clearly ordered online, and placed it back down with slow precision. "It's good to see how you've made yourselves comfortable." Kelsey smiled triumphantly, mistaking civility for surrender. "Glad you approve." Janet met her gaze. "Approval never crossed my mind." The air between them went icy. Ethan shifted uneasily, Layla's small hand clutching his. Janet set her tote on the marble counter, straightened the strap and said, "I'll take the guest room for now." Kelsey's smile froze. "Excuse me?" Janet met her eyes. "You heard me." The wind from the balcony doors whispered through the penthouse, lifting a loose strand of Janet's silver hair. For a moment she looked almost regal, an empress quietly reclaiming her throne. Kelsey opened her mouth to argue, but something in Janet's composure stopped her cold. Janet's phone buzzed inside her tote. One quiet vibration, and her lips curved ever so slightly. She didn't check the message. She didn't need to. It was just the beginning. The morning light spilled across the penthouse like it was inspecting the damage. It caught on polished chrome, bounced off mirrored walls, and revealed a home stripped of history. Janet moved through each room in silence, her hand brushing surfaces that no longer remembered her touch. The living room was first. The antique chest? Gone. The Persian rug? Gone. The smell of cedar and bourbon that had once defined the place had been replaced by something synthetic and citrusy, like a showroom. On the mantel sat a collection of faceless sculptures, all white and meaningless, where her husband's sailing trophies once stood. She paused at the corner where her wedding photo used to hang. The nail holes were filled in, painted over. Nothing left but smooth, empty wall. Behind her, Kelsey's voice floated from the kitchen. "You're really taking a tour, huh?" she said lightly, pouring herself coffee into a gold-rimmed mug. "We needed a refresh. You know how trends change." Janet didn't answer. She opened the hallway closet, once her husband's coat still hung there, faintly smelling of sea air. Now it was filled with Kelsey's blazers, color-coded like a boutique rack. The sight made Janet's throat tighten, but she exhaled slowly, forcing the emotion back into its cage. In the guest room, a mirror had replaced the painting her husband loved, a watercolor of the keys. She could almost see him sitting on the edge of the bed, teasing her for overpaying the artist. That quiet laugh that used to fill the space was gone, replaced by the hum of an air purifier. From the living room, Kelsey called again, casual and cold. "If you're looking for something, you might not find it. We decluttered a lot when we moved in. Fresh start, you know." Janet walked back toward her. "Did you declutter the memories too?" Kelsey gave a little laugh, pretending not to hear the edge in her voice. "Some of them didn't fit the new design." Janet looked out over the balcony, the view just as stunning as ever. Biscayne Bay glittering like broken glass, the horizon wide and merciless. Below, the pool deck was empty except for a single maintenance worker dragging a net through still water. Everything else was quiet, controlled. She turned back inside, her expression neutral, but her eyes cataloging every theft. The missing heirloom clock, the swapped furniture, even the curtains changed from deep navy to sterile white. The place had her address, but none of her soul. When she reached the foyer, Kelsey was still talking, spinning her own narrative. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was nice before, but a little heavy. We wanted something brighter, something that felt like us. Janet stopped beside her. And what does us feel like, Kelsey? Kelsey smiled thinly. Progress. Janet tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to make Kelsey's smile falter. I see. She moved to the entry table and picked up a small, glossy real estate magazine. The latest issue, folded open to a spread about modernizing old luxury. She studied the page, then quietly set it down. I think I'll get some air, Janet said. Of course, Kelsey said brightly, already turning away. Just don't lock yourself out. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Janet stepped into the corridor. The air out here was cooler, quieter, cleaner somehow. As the doors closed behind her, she felt her shoulders drop for the first time since stepping inside. Down the hallway, a voice called, warm and amused. About time you came home. Maria Velasquez stood by her door, watering a potted plant that had somehow survived 3 building renovations. Her silver hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief that only comes from knowing more than she should. Janet smiled faintly. Still keeping the hallway greener than the board allows, I see. Maria chuckled. They can find me when they outlive me. So, what's the story? You moving back in for good? Just a short visit, Janet said softly. Maria set the watering can down, her gaze sharp but kind. Records say otherwise. Janet froze, the air in her lungs suddenly heavier. What records? Maria's expression turned sly. The condo board logs. They still show your name on everything. Deed, taxes, HOA. Funny, isn't it? Janet's lips curved, just slightly. Not funny, she murmured. Just accurate. Maria leaned closer, lowering her voice. You're not here for nostalgia, are you? Janet met her eyes. Not even a little. For a beat, neither spoke. The elevator hummed somewhere down the hall. The ocean breeze pressed against the glass windows, and the building seemed to listen. Maria smiled knowingly. Well then, welcome home, Mrs. Brooks. Janet returned the smile, small but razor sharp. Thank you, Maria. As she turned back toward the penthouse, her reflection shimmered in the glass wall. Composed, calm, and quietly dangerous. The next morning arrived drenched in Miami light, bright, unrelenting, and full of exposure. The kind of morning that didn't let anyone hide. Janet moved through the penthouse in silence, the same way a detective might revisit a crime scene. Ethan sat at the breakfast bar, scrolling on his phone, dressed for nowhere in particular. Kelsey leaned against the counter beside him, sipping green juice, already scrolling through emails like a woman too busy for conscience. Janet opened a drawer beneath the built-in bookshelves, empty. Another, empty. Her movements were slow, deliberate. Where's the filing cabinet? She asked finally, not looking up. Ethan blinked. What filing cabinet? The oak one, she said. Your father kept it in his study. Tax returns, deeds, insurance, everything. Kelsey made a show of yawning. Oh, that thing. We had to get rid of it. It didn't match the new setup. We shredded a lot of old junk. Janet froze mid-motion. Junk? Kelsey shrugged, too casually. You know, receipts, yellowed papers, stuff nobody needs anymore. It was falling apart. Janet closed the drawer. Falling apart, she repeated, as if tasting the words for poison. Ethan shifted uneasily on his stool. Mom, if you're looking for something specific, maybe we can call the accountant. I already did, Janet interrupted softly. He keeps nothing beyond 5 years. You'd know that if you'd read the trust agreement. Kelsey rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Not everything has to be a lecture. It's just paper. Janet turned toward her, eyes glinting under the morning light. It's never just paper, Kelsey. Paper builds everything you think you own. The tension thickened, but Janet didn't stay long enough for Kelsey's comeback. She took her keys, her tote, and left without another word. The drive downtown felt almost like muscle memory. The city had changed. More condos, more cranes, more mirrored glass reflecting sky. But Janet's route hadn't. She parked beside the brick building of Seacoast Trust Bank, a place so old-fashioned it still smelled faintly of paper and polish. The bank manager, a balding man in a navy suit, recognized her instantly. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, brightening. "It's been a while. Not long enough for anyone to lose records, I hope." He chuckled politely. "Of course not. Would you like to access your box?" She nodded once. Moments later, she stood inside the small private vault room. The cool air wrapped around her shoulders, and the silence was absolute, just the faint ticking of the wall clock. Janet slid her key into box 312 and turned it. The drawer glided open. Inside lay a thick brown envelope, neatly labeled in her late husband's handwriting. Penthouse 2304, Trust and Ownership Docs. Her hands didn't tremble this time. She lifted the envelope, unfolded the papers, and began reading. The original deed, her husband's signature, her own. Notarized, recorded, untouched. Next, the trust transfer, listing Janet Louise Brooks as sole surviving owner. And finally, the HOA records, stamped paid in full through 2024. The corners of her mouth lifted. "Still mine," she whispered. She replaced the documents carefully, sliding them into a sleek new folder before tucking them into her tote. On her way out, she paused at the glass doors and looked out toward the skyline, Miami glittering in the noon sun, arrogant and loud. Kelsey wanted ownership that sparkled. Janet had ownership that endured. That afternoon, she found Maria in the lobby, chatting with the concierge like she ran the place, which, in spirit, she did. "Afternoon, sweetheart," Maria said, spotting her. "You've been busy." "Errands," Janet said simply. Maria leaned on the marble counter. "The board had a digital update today. I checked it out of habit." "And?" "No transfer filed. Not in your husband's estate, not in any trust. You're still the listed owner." Maria grinned. "Guess the princess upstairs forgot how to read fine print." Janet's smile was subtle but razor sharp. "Because there wasn't one." Maria arched a brow. "You sound awfully sure." "I am," Janet said, her tone calm but final. "They built their little empire on assumption. I built mine on signatures." Maria laughed under her breath. "Oh, this is going to get interesting." Janet looked past her to the elevator doors reflecting the afternoon light. Her reflection stared back, steady, composed, unstoppable. "Interesting isn't the word I'd use," she murmured. Maria tilted her head. "Then what would you call it?" Janet turned toward the elevators, the faintest glint in her eyes. "Correction." The doors slid shut behind her, and the soft hum of the machinery swallowed her smile. The following morning, Miami's skyline shimmered behind a thin veil of humidity. Glass towers piercing the clouds like promises made to the rich. Janet stood in front of one of them, Lane and Associates, 24 floors above Biscayne Boulevard. She adjusted the pearl button on her sleeve before stepping through the revolving door. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "Janet Brooks," she said. "Victor Lane is expecting me." The woman's expression shifted instantly, respect with a touch of curiosity. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks. He'll be right with you." Janet waited in the minimalist lobby, watching the city's reflection glide across the mirrored walls. Everything here was glass, order, and control. The language of people who won their battles before the first shot was fired. When Victor appeared, he looked exactly as she remembered. Pressed charcoal suit, clean-shaven jaw, silver cufflinks that caught the light like punctuation marks. His handshake was cool, precise, and brief. "Janet," he said, "I was hoping this wasn't a social visit." "Not even close." They walked into his corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the turquoise sweep of the bay. A long walnut table divided the room, scattered with files, case notes, and a coffee mug that read, "Due diligence never sleeps." Janet placed her folder on the table and opened it. The deed. The trust. The HOA records. Victor leaned forward, scanning every line. After several minutes, he set the papers down, tapped them once, and looked at her over his glasses. "You own it outright. Period." Janet exhaled quietly, though there was no surprise in her expression. "Good. I wanted to hear it out loud." Victor's voice stayed even. "They've been living there under the assumption of transfer?" "Assumption is generous," she said. "They replaced the furniture, claimed a mortgage existed, and told me I was a guest in my own home." He smiled faintly. "One part admiration, two parts strategy. You've been patient." "Patience isn't surrender," Janet said. "Let them keep talking. We'll keep filing." Victor leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his legal pad. "We'll begin with a confirmation of ownership. Simple, unprovocative. Then we'll move to reinstatement on all HOA voting rights. Quiet, official. No headlines yet." "Good," Janet said. "They like attention. I like results." He scribbled a note. "You'll need a supporting witness. Someone who can vouch for your continuous ownership and payment history." "Maria Velasquez," Janet said instantly. "She's been in that building longer than the plumbing." Victor chuckled. "Perfect. A credible local voice." He rose and poured coffee into two small ceramic cups, sliding one across the table. "You always did play the long game, Janet." "I learned from the best," she said, glancing at the bay. "My husband didn't believe in public fights. He believed in signatures and silence." Victor nodded approvingly. "Then we'll fight quietly." By late afternoon, the first set of filings went out. Clean, precise, digital. A courtesy copy to the HOA office, another to the building's management company. No accusations, just a statement of fact. At 5:17 p.m., Victor texted her. "Filed. They'll see it tomorrow." Janet read it while standing on the penthouse balcony, the ocean turning silver under the fading light. Below her, the city buzzed on, unaware that something small but seismic had just shifted. Inside, the faint sound of laughter drifted from the living room. Kelsey on a video call, talking too loudly about their place and their upgrades. Janet let the noise wash over her like static. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. When her phone buzzed again, it was Maria. "You've started something, haven't you?" Maria's voice came through warm but knowing. "I'm just clarifying ownership," Janet said. Maria chuckled. "Oh, I know what that means. The board chair called me already. Says there's a conflicting submission in the records. Wants to schedule a review." "Tell him to check the payments," Janet said. "They'll find my name on everyone." "Already did," Maria replied. "I told them I'd help push it through. Make sure the right paperwork gets to the right inbox." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Maria said. "Kelsey's not going to take this quietly." Janet's gaze drifted back to the skyline. The storm clouds over the bay had turned purple at the edges, flashing with far-away lightning. "She doesn't have to," Janet murmured. "Noise can't undo ink." The next morning, Victor's assistant sent out soft inquiries to the condo board, courteous emails, requests for confirmation, reminders of compliance clauses buried deep in the bylaws. By noon, 3 board members had opened the file. By evening, one had already forwarded it to the building's attorney. And upstairs in Penthouse 2304, Kelsey received a polite letter with the HOA seal. Simple header. No warning. Dear resident, it began. We are currently updating ownership records for your unit. Please confirm your current authorization to occupy. She read it twice, her wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. Then she called Ethan. What did your mother do? The building's boardroom was glass-walled and air-conditioned to the point of sterility. Every sound muffled, every emotion meant to be invisible. But the morning's agenda had already broken that illusion. At the head of the long mahogany table, a clerk cleared her throat. Item 6. Confirmation of ownership for Unit 2304. The chair, a man in his 70s with the tan of someone who hadn't worked indoors since the Reagan administration, adjusted his glasses. All filings reviewed, documentation verified. Ownership of Unit 2304 stands under Janet Louise Brooks. Across from him, Victor's calm voice carried easily through the hush. As it should, the transfer request was never legitimate because it never existed. He slid a packet of notarized documents toward the board. Each page bore the HOA seal and Janet's steady signature in black ink. Tax records, he said. Insurance renewals, assessments paid directly from Mrs. Brooks's trust, all continuous, all hers. There was a murmur, soft, disbelieving. Outside the glass walls, Miami shimmered, oblivious to the small, polite earthquake occurring 24 floors up. When the meeting adjourned, Victor texted one word to Janet. Done. By the time Janet returned home, the mood inside the penthouse had changed. Kelsey stood near the kitchen island, phone in one hand, HOA letter in the other, her face flushed crimson. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, motionless, as if bracing for impact. You want to explain this? Kelsey's voice was sharp enough to slice through the quiet. She waved the letter like evidence in a trial. It says your name, on every document. They're saying this place belongs to you. Janet set her purse on the counter, unhurried. That's correct. Kelsey laughed, but it came out cracked. You can't be serious. We've been living here for 2 years. We've paid utilities, insurance, furniture. This is our home. Janet met her eyes, calm and unreadable. Utilities don't grant ownership, Kelsey. Renters pay those too. Ethan looked up, pale. Mom, what's going on? Are you saying this isn't in my name? No, Ethan, Janet said softly. It never was. He blinked as if the world had tilted. But Kelsey whirled on him. Don't you dare put this on me. I asked about the deed months ago, and you said your mom handled it. I assumed. You assumed, Janet said, cutting in. And you assumed wrong. The air in the room thickened. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore below, a distant rhythmic reminder that the world kept moving, ownership or not. Kelsey slammed the letter down on the counter. She's trying to scam us, she shouted, turning toward Ethan. Can't you see what's happening? She waited until we put money into this place, then she pounces to take it back. It's manipulation, elder fraud, whatever you call it. This is insane. Janet's expression didn't flicker. I don't need to scam anyone, she said. I already built this home. I just came to reclaim what's mine. Ethan stood, his face ghost white. You could have told me, he said quietly. You could have said something before. Before what? Janet asked. Before you let her convince you that family is something to redecorate? He flinched at the tone, soft but piercing. Kelsey's breathing grew fast, erratic. You can't just kick us out, Janet. We've invested here. We've made improvements. We have rights. Show them, Janet said. On paper. Kelsey's mouth opened, but no sound came. Janet turned and walked toward the hallway. I'll give you both time to calm down, she said over her shoulder. Rage makes people careless. She didn't see Layla at first. the small figure standing by the doorway of her old bedroom, clutching a book to her chest. Her eyes were wide, frightened not by volume, but by tension. "Grandma?" she whispered. Janet's voice softened instantly. "It's all right, sweetheart." "Mom's mad," Layla said. "She said you're taking the house." Janet knelt so they were eye level. The light from the window caught the silver in her hair, softening her sharpness into something almost gentle. "Some things," she said quietly, "belong to the people who build them, not the ones who borrow them." Layla studied her face, searching for something she didn't have words for. "So, we're staying?" Janet smiled faintly. "We'll see." Layla nodded, trusting that answer more than any lawyer's stamp could convey. She slipped her small hand into her grandmother's, holding on for just a second longer than necessary before running off toward her room. In the living room, Kelsey's voice rose again, shrill and panicked into the phone. "Yes, I want to report fraudulent ownership documentation. Yes. Her name's Janet Brooks. She's my mother-in-law." Janet closed her bedroom door quietly, the sound of the latch snapping like punctuation. She didn't need to raise her voice. The papers had already spoken. On her desk, her phone buzzed with a new message from Victor. "HOA confirmed. All records updated. You're sole owner again. Congratulations." Janet smiled faintly, tucking the phone away. The wind outside pushed against the glass, rattling it just enough to sound like applause. The HOA conference room smelled faintly of citrus polish and tension. The long table gleamed under the recessed lighting, surrounded by leather chairs too large for the people sitting in them. At one end, the board members murmured in low voices, flipping through manila folders that bore Janet's name in sharp black print. Janet sat at the opposite end, poised and unhurried, her reading glasses resting low on her nose. Beside her sat Victor, calm, focused, his tablet already synced to every exhibit they'd need. Across the table, Kelsey sat with her arms folded tight, jaw set, and nails digging crescents into her palms. Ethan was beside her, hunched slightly forward, eyes fixed on the paperwork like a man waiting for a sentence he didn't understand. The chair, Mr. Bennett cleared his throat. "Let's bring this meeting to order," he said, his voice gravelly but steady. "We're here to resolve the question of property ownership, tax responsibility, and board voting rights for Unit 2304. Kelsey spoke before anyone else could. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We've lived there for years. I handle the bills. My husband—" "Mrs. Brooks," Bennett interrupted firmly, "you'll have an opportunity to speak after the review of documentation." Kelsey's cheeks flushed, but she bit her tongue. Victor nodded to Janet. "Mrs. Brooks?" Janet rose slowly, the kind of deliberate movement that drew attention without asking for it. She placed 3 binders on the table, each labeled neatly with dates, tax years, and signatures. "These," she said, her voice even, "are certified records of every property tax payment from 2006 to the present. All drawn directly from my trust account. I've brought the original receipts as well, for verification." The chair leaned forward. "And the most recent HOA dues?" Janet flipped to the back of the binder and slid out a printed receipt. "Paid through next quarter," she said. "Automatic transfer. Never missed a single payment." Victor added, "We've also provided digital verification from Seacoast Trust, confirming that Mrs. Brooks has been the only listed payer since the property's acquisition." The board murmured again, paper rustling like dry leaves. Kelsey couldn't help herself. "So what? We've paid other expenses. Renovations, furniture, upkeep. This doesn't prove she lives there. We do." Mr. Bennett turned toward her. "Mrs. Brooks, please. You'll have your turn." But Kelsey leaned forward, voice rising. "You don't understand. She's manipulating this entire process. She waited until we invested everything into that condo, and now she's... Enough. Bennett's voice cut through the room. One more interruption, and I'll have to ask you to step outside. The room went still. Maria, seated in the audience row reserved for residents, crossed her arms. Maybe she should, she said dryly. You're talking about the woman who's paid more in HOA dues than you've earned this year. A ripple of chuckles broke through the tension, quickly stifled by Bennett's gavel tap. Kelsey shot Maria a glare that could have stripped paint, but Maria only raised an eyebrow. Janet remained standing, calm and unmoved. I'm not here to argue, she said softly. I'm here to clarify. Victor slid another document forward. An HOA certification form dated last week, signed by Bennett himself. This, he said, is the updated ownership roster reflecting Mrs. Brooks as the sole legal owner and voting member for Unit 2304. All previous inquiries or claims have been reviewed and dismissed as unsupported. Bennett took the paper, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud. Effective immediately. The board reaffirms Janet Louise Brooks as primary owner and voting representative. The words landed like a quiet explosion. Ethan exhaled shakily, staring down at the table. His hands clenched around the edge, knuckles pale. Kelsey's expression froze somewhere between disbelief and fury. You can't just reaffirm something like that, she blurted. That's not fair. Bennett met her glare without blinking. Fairness doesn't enter into it. Legality does. Janet gathered her binders, closing each with the soft click of finality. I appreciate the board's diligence, she said politely. It's good to see procedure still matters to someone. As she turned to leave, Kelsey slammed a hand on the table. This isn't over. Janet paused at the door, glancing back just long enough for her gaze to meet Kelsey's, steady, unshaken. It never is. For people who lose. Victor's mouth twitched in the faintest smirk as he followed her out. Outside the conference room, the sound of the ocean filtered faintly through the glass hallway, peaceful, relentless, eternal. Janet walked with measured grace, Maria joining her halfway down the corridor. Smooth as silk, Maria said. They didn't know what hit them. They will, Janet replied. But it'll be on paper, not in shouting. Maria chuckled, her eyes gleaming. You're colder than the marble in that lobby. Janet smiled faintly. Marble lasts longer. They reached the elevator. Janet pressed the button and looked out toward the bay. Sunlight flared off the water, blinding and beautiful. The request came wrapped in condescension. A neatly worded letter from the condo board's attorney, suggesting that, in light of recent disputes, Mrs. Janet Brooks submit to a cognitive evaluation to verify her fitness in matters of ownership and estate management. Victor slid the letter across her breakfast table without a word. The morning sun turned the gold of her teacup into firelight. Janet read every line, unmoved. They're playing the age card, Victor said finally. Typical delay tactic. Janet folded the paper once and set it aside. Then let's not delay. 3 days later, she sat in a windowed office overlooking Brickell Avenue, a place filled with soft jazz, neutral walls, and furniture designed to calm people who couldn't be calmed. The therapist, Dr. Everett, was in his mid-40s, neat beard, kind eyes that hid the clockwork precision behind them. He offered her a gentle smile. We're just going to have a conversation, Mrs. Brooks. Think of it as an interview. Janet gave a polite nod. I've passed more interviews than I can count. They began with simple questions. Dates, sequences, recall. She answered each without hesitation, her voice steady, her wit occasionally slicing through his formality. When he asked her to recount her daily routine, she didn't list hobbies or errands. She detailed investment yields, HOA bylaws, and the nuances of property law that most attorneys misquote. After an hour, Dr. Everett leaned back, tapping his pen thoughtfully. Your alertness, recall, and logic are well above average. You understand the implications of every document you've signed, and you show no cognitive decline whatsoever. Janet smiled faintly. You sound surprised. He returned the smile. Not surprised. Impressed. Many people your age rely on memory like old film. Grainy, faded. Yours is crystal clear. Because I never let anyone else narrate my life, she said simply. He chuckled, closing the folder. If I were on a jury, I'd want you as my witness. That evening, Victor called as she stood on the balcony, the skyline burning orange in the dying light. Results are in, he said. Superior across every metric. Dr. Everett's official statement reads like a character endorsement. I expected as much. This makes us bulletproof, Victor continued. Any claim of diminished capacity dies here. They can't use your age, your judgment, or your trust structure against you now. It's over, legally speaking. Janet's eyes followed a yacht carving through the bay, white foam trailing like punctuation. Nothing's over until they stop pretending they can win. Victor paused. Meaning? She's not finished, Janet said. Kelsey doesn't know when to stop losing. The next afternoon, Ethan knocked softly on her door. She hesitated before letting him in. He looked tired, creased shirt, dark circles, guilt clinging to him like humidity. Mom, he said quietly, I heard about the evaluation. I just wanted to say I'm sorry you had to go through that. Janet studied his face for a long moment. You watched her file it. Ethan's lips parted, but no defense came. I didn't think she'd actually... You didn't think at all, Janet interrupted, voice still calm, still sharp. You let her drag my name into a process meant for the unfit and the failing. Do you know what that means? He looked down. I do now. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of the waves. Finally, Janet spoke. You're my son. That doesn't change. But family isn't a shield when you hand someone else the sword. Ethan swallowed hard. She said it was just a precaution. She said a lot of things, Janet murmured. That doesn't make them true. He nodded slowly, shame flickering behind his eyes. I'll fix this. Somehow. You won't need to, Janet said, turning back toward the window. I already did. Across the city, in a luxury salon filled with mirrors and gossip, Kelsey sat scrolling furiously through her phone. A notification pinged, motion for competency review, denied. She stared at it, unblinking, color draining from her face. The stylist beside her tried to make polite conversation, but she didn't hear a word. She's untouchable now, Kelsey whispered, more to herself than anyone. The stylist blinked. Excuse me? Kelsey stood abruptly, throwing $100 bill on the counter. Keep the change. Outside, her reflection flashed in the tinted glass. Perfect, furious, unraveling. She pulled out her phone again, dialing Ethan. No answer. Then again, louder, desperate. Pick up, she hissed. You have no idea what she's capable of. Back at the penthouse, Janet placed Dr. Everett's signed evaluation neatly into her binder, beside the deed and trust papers. Another weapon filed, another lie disarmed. The city lights flickered below her, glittering like tiny confessions. She closed the binder with a soft click and turned off the lamp. The envelope arrived at 9:12 a.m., hand-delivered by a uniformed courier who looked far too cheerful for the kind of news he carried. Kelsey opened the door, still in silk pajamas, coffee cup trembling slightly as he asked for her signature. Delivery for Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, he said, polite and brisk. Kelsey scrawled her name on the digital pad, more out of reflex than comprehension, and shut the door before he could wish her a nice day. The envelope was heavy, official, cream-colored, embossed with the seal of Lane and Associates. Her stomach tightened as she tore it open. The first page read like an obituary. Notice of termination of occupancy, Penthouse Unit 2304. Her breath caught. No, 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 no. Ethan walked in from the kitchen, tie loose, expression already wary. What is it now? She thrust the papers at him. Read it. He did. Eyes scanning the legal paragraphs. The words hit him in slow motion. Revocation of access. Termination of tenant rights. 30 days to vacate. Eviction, Kelsey said, voice cracking. She's evicting us. Ethan sank onto the couch, staring blankly. She wouldn't. She would, Kelsey snapped. And she did. The sound of footsteps drew their attention. Janet entering the room, calm as ever, Victor just behind her with a slim leather briefcase. Kelsey spun toward them. You can't do this to us. Victor didn't flinch. Legally, Mrs. Brooks can. The HOA and property records have confirmed her as the sole owner. This is simply the formal notice of enforcement. Kelsey's voice sharpened to a scream. This is our home. We've lived here. We've made it ours. Janet looked around the pristine living room. Mirrored furniture, artificial flowers, a designer couch that meant nothing. You made it look different, she said quietly. You didn't make it yours. Kelsey's face twisted. You heartless. Ethan rose quickly, stepping between them. Kelsey, stop. She shoved his hand away. Don't you dare defend her. She's kicking her own family out. Janet met her gaze, unblinking. I'm removing tenants who have overstayed a courtesy, not family. Ethan swallowed hard, turning toward his mother. Where will we go? Wherever you choose, Janet said. You have 30 days to decide. He ran a hand through his hair, defeated. This isn't how families solve things. Families don't file competency motions, Janet replied, voice cool and clean as glass. They talk. You made a choice when you let her speak for you. Victor closed his briefcase with a quiet snap. You've both been served. I'll expect acknowledgement of receipt within 48 hours. Non-compliance will result in immediate court action. Kelsey's lips trembled, her anger bleeding into panic. You'll regret this. I'll sue you. I'll have every lawyer in Miami lined up to tear this apart. Victor's tone was even, almost kind. Then I'll see them in court. But I wouldn't advise it. You'll lose before the ink dries. The room fell into silence. Only the sound of the ocean through the balcony doors filled the gap. Then a small voice broke through. Grandma. Layla stood in the hallway, holding a stuffed rabbit, her hair tangled from sleep. Her eyes darted between her parents' faces and Janet's. What's happening? Kelsey turned, instantly softening her tone. Nothing, baby. Grown-up stuff. But Layla wasn't fooled. She looked at Janet instead. As if truth had always lived there. Are we leaving? Janet knelt, meeting her granddaughter's gaze. You don't have to. Layla hesitated, clutching her rabbit tighter. Can I stay with you? Janet's eyes warmed, the faintest shimmer beneath their calm. You never left. For a moment the world stilled. Layla stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Janet's neck. The embrace was quiet, absolute. Kelsey's breath came sharp. Layla, come here, right now. But the child didn't move. She just held tighter. Victor glanced toward Janet, then at his watch. We'll proceed as planned, he said softly. I'll handle the board filings this afternoon. Janet nodded. Thank you, Victor. He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. Mrs. Brooks, he said, I've handled a lot of ownership disputes. This one's different. How so? His eyes softened. Because you're not just reclaiming a home, you're reclaiming your bloodline. And then he was gone. Kelsey's composure shattered the moment the door closed. You think this is over? You have no idea who you're dealing with, she shouted, voice echoing through the penthouse. You'll regret underestimating me. Janet stood, smoothing the wrinkles from her sleeve. No, Kelsey, she said evenly. I regret overestimating you. The elevator dinged softly, its reflection slicing across the marble lobby of Ocean View Towers like a blade. When the doors slid open, Janet stepped out, her heels silent on the floor. She didn't need to check her watch. She already knew what time the second blow would land. Upstairs, in Penthouse 2304, the mail slot clicked. Kelsey was pacing the living room, hair unbrushed, a robe hanging loose from one shoulder. When she saw the thick envelope stamped with the HOA's blue seal, her stomach dropped. She tore it open with shaking hands, eyes scanning the first few lines, then froze. Her voice rose into the stillness. "What is this?" Ethan emerged from the bedroom, suitcase half-packed on the bed. "Another notice?" Kelsey's laugh cracked in half. "Notice? It's a bill." She shoved the paper toward him. 3 years of unpaid HOA fines and maintenance dues, backdated. They're saying we owe all of it. Ethan blinked, confused. "That can't be right. Mom, she was paying." Kelsey cut in, pacing. "Until she reclaimed the title. Now they've reassigned all outstanding fines to us. They're saying we benefited from the property's use without authorization." Ethan sank onto the couch. "How much?" Kelsey's eyes flicked down. $72,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. There was a knock at the door, 2 measured taps, familiar, deliberate. Janet. When Kelsey opened it, Janet was already holding her phone, Victor's voice audible on speaker. "I thought you'd both want clarification," Victor said smoothly. "The board reviewed prior dues, fines, and maintenance assessments. Legally, the account's responsibility transfers to the occupying residents, meaning you two." Kelsey's face went red. "You can't just transfer debt. That's insane." Victor didn't blink, even through the phone. "Actually, it's statute. Section 718.116 of Florida Condominium Law. You'll find it accurate and binding." Ethan rubbed his temple. "So she's not responsible anymore?" "Correct," Victor said. "Mrs. Brooks is cleared. Every outstanding fine, every late fee, it's yours now." Janet's tone was almost soft. "You wanted ownership, Kelsey. It comes with bills." Kelsey's hand trembled around the paper. "You've destroyed us." "No," Janet said. "I just stopped paying for your performance." Kelsey's jaw clenched, her eyes darting toward the furniture. The glass tables, the designer couch, the expensive lamps that filled the room like trophies. "Fine. We'll sell what we bought. The furniture, the art." "You can't." Janet's voice sliced through the room. Kelsey spun toward her. "Watch me." Janet stepped forward, holding out another paper, this one stamped by the HOA's legal counsel. "Everything inside this penthouse is under property inventory review. Until the board completes inspection, nothing leaves this unit, not even a spoon." Kelsey's mouth fell open. "That's illegal." Victor's voice came through again, steady and cold. "It's evidence control, Mrs. Brooks. Not illegal? Preventative?" Kelsey let out a strangled noise somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You're monsters." "Correction," Janet said. "We're thorough." Ethan hadn't said a word. He stood, slow and deliberate, and disappeared down the hallway. When he returned, he was carrying his suitcase again, this time zipped. "I'm done," he said quietly. Kelsey whirled around. "What are you talking about?" He looked at her with tired eyes, the kind that had stopped believing in rescue. "You wanted this fight. You dragged me into it. You turned Mom into an enemy, and now you've made sure we don't have a single friend left in this building. You're not just going to walk out." "I'm not walking," he said. "I'm leaving before the ground gives out under you." He brushed past her and out the door without looking back. Kelsey stood there, trembling, the HOA letter still in her hand. The penthouse suddenly felt cavernous, stripped of oxygen. From the hallway, Maria's voice floated in, warm and steady. Rough morning? Kelsey spun, startled, but Maria wasn't talking to her. She was walking toward Janet, 2 paper cups of coffee in hand. I brought you the strong kind, Maria said, handing one over. I saw the board's update this morning. They're really clearing house. Janet took the cup with a small nod. Necessary work tends to be loud at first. Maria smiled knowingly. I see progress. Janet's gaze drifted toward the open door where Ethan's suitcase had disappeared. Progress, she repeated softly. It's not revenge, Maria. It's return. Maria lifted her coffee like a toast. Same difference, if you ask me. Down the hallway, Kelsey's voice rose again, hoarse, frantic, calling Ethan's name. But he didn't answer. The elevator had already closed and the building hummed its indifferent rhythm. Janet took a slow sip of her coffee, the bitter heat grounding her. She turned toward the balcony, where sunlight spilled across the tile, bright and merciless. She didn't smile, but her eyes held the stillness of someone who'd finally balanced the scale. For the first time in months, the penthouse was quiet enough to hear the sea. No shouting, no slammed doors, just the hum of the air vents and the distant rhythm of waves striking the glass shoreline. Janet stood in the doorway of the guest room, her sleeves rolled, sunlight stretching across the hardwood floors. The room had been Kelsey's office, all chrome desk and ring light, sterile as a showroom. Now it was returning to what it once was, a place to rest, to read, to belong. She'd spent the morning pulling down Kelsey's mirrored wall art, replacing it with soft linen curtains that caught the breeze. The furniture arrived mid-afternoon. White shelves, a small oak desk, a twin bed dressed in seafoam green quilts. The scent of fresh paint mingled with ocean salt. Janet worked slowly, deliberately, rehanging the old family photographs from storage. There was her husband on the balcony in the late 80s, wind in his hair. There was baby Ethan, face smeared with birthday frosting, and in the corner frame, a picture of Layla, chubby-cheeked and sunburned, grinning beside the pool. When she stepped back to look at it all together, the room no longer felt hollow. It felt like before. Layla appeared in the doorway, barefoot, hair damp from her shower. She stopped short, eyes wide. Is this mine? Janet smiled, kneeling to her level. It's ours. For now, it's where you'll stay when you're here. Layla took a slow step inside, fingertips grazing the quilt. It feels like before, she whispered. When Grandpa was alive, when Mom and Dad didn't fight so much. Janet's throat tightened. That's the idea. Layla went straight to the bookshelf. You kept them, she said, pulling out a worn copy of The Secret Garden. I don't throw away stories, Janet said softly. They always find their way back. Layla climbed onto the bed, curling up with the book open in her lap. Can I read here tonight? Of course. Janet reached out to smooth her granddaughter's hair, then left her with the window cracked open just enough for the breeze to slip through. Later that evening, the doorbell chimed. Once, quiet, tentative. Janet opened it to find Ethan on the threshold, wearing the same shirt he'd left in but now wrinkled and rain-damp. He hesitated. I didn't think you'd answer. I didn't think you'd come back. His eyes dropped to the floor. I just wanted to see her, to see if she's okay. She's in the guest room, Janet said. You can. He stepped inside, pausing as his gaze fell on the new space. Soft colors, warm light, the faint smell of lavender and old books. Layla was already half asleep with the book still in her hand. Ethan watched her from the doorway, his expression caught somewhere between relief and guilt. Janet joined him quietly. She looks peaceful, he said. She should, Janet replied. She's not supposed to grow up in chaos. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Thank you. For her. Janet looked at him for a long moment. her voice even, but not cold. She's why I came back. Ethan's eyes glistened, but he didn't speak. The sound of Layla's breathing filled the silence. When he finally turned to leave, he stopped by the door. You were right, he said softly. I should have protected her better. Both of you. Janet didn't respond. He didn't expect her to. Some apologies didn't need answers. They just needed to exist. Maria arrived the next morning, holding a tray with 2 steaming mugs. She stepped into the guest room, eyes widening. Well, look at this, she said, smiling. You've turned the coldest room in this place into something human again. Janet smiled faintly, smoothing the quilt. It's a better place now. Maria nodded. It feels like a home again, not a display case. Layla peeked from the bed, blinking sleepily. Morning. Miss Maria. Maria winked. Morning, sunshine. You like it here? Layla grinned. It feels safe. Maria shot Janet a knowing look. Then it's doing its job. As Maria left, Janet stood by the window. From the 23rd floor, the horizon seemed endless, the city stretching away in color and motion. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, an email notification from Victor. Subject: Kelsey's countermove. Janet opened it, scanning the first few lines. Her jaw tightened slightly. Kelsey had filed an appeal, a public complaint to the HOA and local news, accusing Janet of fraud and elder coercion. Janet exhaled slowly, closing the phone. The light outside flickered across her face, half shadow, half flame. The first video appeared on a Thursday morning. Kelsey's face filled the screen, lit perfectly by a ring light. Her voice smooth and practiced. The caption read, "When your toxic Emil steals your home and your peace." She spoke directly to the camera, eyes glistening with artificial sincerity. Imagine, she said, opening your door one day and realizing your own mother-in-law has schemed to take everything from you. The place you built, the life you made, gone. Just because she couldn't let go of control. By noon, the clip had over 50,000 views. By Friday, there were 3 more, each more dramatic than the last. Kelsey cried softly in one, holding up old photos of the penthouse. In another, she gestured toward boxes piled behind her, claiming she was being forced out by family betrayal. The hashtags spread. Toxic Mill. Elder abuse flip. Justice for Kelsey. She knew exactly how to frame herself as the victim of a cruel matriarch and a broken system. And the internet, hungry for villains, believed her. Victor sent the first screenshots that afternoon. Each one arrived in Janet's inbox like an echo of Kelsey's desperation. 1. Kelsey crying, voice trembling. She's manipulating the HOA with her lawyer. 2. A thread of sympathetic comments. You poor thing. That generation is so bitter. 3. A now-deleted post where Kelsey mentioned the address, bait for gossip blogs. Janet scrolled through the feed, unbothered. She's trying to turn strangers into soldiers, she said, setting down her phone. Victor's reply came through seconds later. Already on it. Collecting timestamps and metadata. Once verified, we'll send cease and desists for defamation. Janet smiled faintly. Good. Let her play her game. We'll answer with paper, not pixels. 2 days later, Maria knocked on her door with a latte and a smirk. You've seen it, I assume? I've seen enough, Janet replied. Maria set the coffee down. Half the building has too. But don't worry, people here have long memories. They know who paid for these walls. Janet arched an eyebrow. And who pays on time? Exactly. Maria chuckled, lowering her voice. Her little audience won't last long. Internet outrage burns fast and dies faster. Janet looked out the window, watching the waves fold and crash beneath the balcony. Truth doesn't need followers, she said. It just needs time. That time came faster than Kelsey expected. On Monday morning, Victor's office sent out 5 formal legal notices, each one addressed to Kelsey's PR representative, her social media sponsors, and the influencer agency that managed her brand deals. The language was meticulous: defamation, false representation, harassment of a private citizen. By Tuesday, her sponsorship with Glow South Beauty was temporarily suspended pending investigation. By Wednesday, her fitness app deal quietly vanished, and by Thursday, her online following turned on her. Screenshots of court documents circulated, official HOA filings showing Janet Brooks as verified owner. Commenters dug deeper, comparing timestamps, dissecting inconsistencies in Kelsey's story. Her tearful confession videos became memes. "Guess the email wasn't the villain after all," one user wrote beneath her latest post. The numbers plummeted. Her likes, once in the thousands, now trickled into double digits. At sunset, Janet and Maria sat on the balcony with glasses of Pinot, the city glowing below them. Maria scrolled through her phone, laughing. "She's deleting everything. Poof, like it never happened." Janet didn't look up from her crossword. That's the thing about lies. They're heavy to carry and easy to drop. Maria grinned. "You enjoying this just a little?" Janet's eyes flicked upward, amusement barely visible. "I don't enjoy chaos. I correct it." They clinked glasses lightly, the sound crisp against the evening breeze. Across town, in a short-term rental lit by flickering candles, Kelsey sat surrounded by empty takeout boxes and her phone face down on the table. The silence pressed in around her. Every notification was another reminder of her unraveling. She tried calling Ethan. No answer. She texted her agent. Delivered, but unread. Finally, she scrolled to Janet's number. Her thumb hovered over call for several seconds. Then she stopped herself, exhaling hard, muttering under her breath, "Not yet." Her phone buzzed, a new email notification. From Legal Affairs, Glow South Beauty. Subject: termination of contract. Her reflection in the screen looked like a stranger. Eyes hollow, mascara smudged. For the first time in weeks, she didn't record anything. She just sat there, staring into the blue glow of her own downfall. Back at the penthouse, Janet glanced at her muted phone, another alert from Victor. Subject: influencer meltdown complete. Next step? Janet typed 2 words before setting the phone aside. Move forward. She stood, walking toward the hallway where Layla's laughter drifted from the newly restored guest room. The sound softened the air, like a melody returning to an instrument that had long been silent. The sound came first, a firm, echoing knock that broke the quiet morning like a gavel. Janet didn't move from her chair by the window. She'd been expecting it. 2 uniformed building security officers stood in the hallway when she opened the door, their expressions neutral, professional. Between them stood the property manager, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Brooks," the manager said politely, "we're here to enforce the HOA's possession order. Ms. Kelsey Brooks has been served notice for removal." Janet nodded once. "Proceed." Inside, Kelsey's voice cracked through the air before they could take a step. "You can't just barge in here." She came storming from the kitchen, hair disheveled, still dressed in last night's clothes. "You think I'm just going to walk away? This is my home." The manager's tone stayed flat. "Ma'am, your occupancy rights were terminated by court confirmation. You're trespassing now." Kelsey's face went white, then red. "I'll call my lawyer." "Already did," one of the officers said. He confirmed receipt. Kelsey's laugh sounded hollow in the marble room. "You're all out of your minds. This is my family's place." Ethan appeared from down the hall, suitcase in hand. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Kelsey," he said quietly, "please, stop." She turned on him, eyes wild. "Stop? They're kicking us out, Ethan. Your mother's kicking us out." He swallowed, setting the suitcase down by the door. Maybe it's time we go. Kelsey blinked, stunned. You're siding with her? He didn't answer. Janet watched the scene unfold with the same calm that had carried her through every storm, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. You've made this as painful as possible, she said evenly. Let's not add embarrassment to the list. Kelsey looked around as though the furniture might defend her, but the penthouse had already turned against her. The walls, the light, even the air, all belonged to someone else again. Where will you even go? She spat. You think this city cares about you? You'll die alone in this place. Janet's gaze was steady. At least I'll die in peace. The officers moved forward, firm but respectful. Kelsey backed away, shaking her head. Don't touch me. I can walk myself out. She turned to Ethan, pleading now. You're really going to let this happen? Ethan's eyes were glassy, his voice low. It already did. She let out a strangled noise, half rage, half heartbreak, then grabbed her bag from the counter and stormed toward the door. As she passed Janet, she stopped, face inches away, breath shaking. You'll regret this, she whispered. Janet's reply was soft, almost pitying. I already did. That's why I stopped. The elevator doors closed behind Kelsey with a final chime. For a moment, no one spoke. The officers exchanged a glance, then nodded toward Janet. All done, Mrs. Brooks. Thank you, she said simply. When they left, Ethan lingered in the doorway, his suitcase still beside him. He looked back at the apartment, the sunlight pooling on the floors, the echo of a life unraveled. She's going to hate me forever, he said. Maybe, Janet replied. But someday she'll realize she lost this long before today. He nodded slowly, adjusting the strap of his bag. Layla's with you now, right? Yes, Janet said. She's in her room. Ethan hesitated. Then she's safe. He turned, stepping into the hallway, and didn't look back. Later, as the sun dipped low, Layla padded into the living room, barefoot and sleepy-eyed. She looked around, confused by the quiet. Where's Mom? Janet hesitated, then knelt beside her. She's gone for a while. Layla's voice was small. Am I staying here for good? Janet brushed a strand of hair from her granddaughter's cheek. This is your home now. The little girl's arms wrapped tight around her, and for the first time in years, Janet felt the weight in her chest lift. Maria arrived soon after, carrying a paper bag that smelled of pastries and cinnamon. She paused in the doorway, taking in the sunlight spilling across the calm space. The energy's different, she said softly. Peaceful. It should be, Janet replied. The house finally remembers who it belongs to. Maria smiled. You've rebuilt more than walls, you know. Janet looked down the hallway toward Layla's laughter. That was the point. Later that night, as moonlight stretched across the balcony, Victor's message arrived. All filings complete. Final possession confirmed. Case closed. Janet set her phone aside, stepping out into the cool night air. Below her, the city shimmered, unbothered, alive. She took a long breath, feeling the stillness of victory settle over her like ocean mist. It came in just after midnight. The phone lit up on the nightstand, Kelsey Brooks, the name glowing cold against the dark. Janet stared at it, unmoving, the city lights flickering across her face. She let it ring until it fell silent, until the voicemail icon appeared like a whisper she didn't ask for. For a long time, she didn't play it. She poured herself a small glass of water, straightened the stack of documents Victor had couriered over, and only then, almost out of obligation, tapped play. Kelsey's voice filled the room. At first, it was soft, controlled. Janet, I just need you to listen, okay? I didn't mean for things to go this far. A shaky inhale followed. You've made your point. You won. Congratulations. But you didn't have to ruin me to do it. A pause. A sniff that didn't quite sound real. Ethan's gone. Layla won't talk to me. The internet thinks I'm some kind of monster. I can't fix this. The tone shifted. Tears now, but the kind that carried calculation in their rhythm. Please, Janet. I just need a chance to explain. You said you're all about family, so prove it. Pick up. Let's talk. Please. Then a final drop into something raw, or something pretending to be. You'll regret shutting me out. You think this is over, but it's not. The voicemail ended with a faint sound, a soft exhale, maybe a sob, or maybe a smile. Janet replayed the last second twice, listening to the silence between the breath. Then she pressed delete. Her thumb hovered for a moment before she opened her contacts, scrolled down, and tapped block this caller. The screen went black again, the finality clean and absolute. She stood, crossed the room, and opened the balcony door. The ocean murmured below, steady and unbothered, as though it too had been waiting for that last thread to snap. The next morning, sunlight poured into the penthouse like something newly forgiven. Janet moved through the kitchen quietly, making oatmeal and setting out Layla's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle and faded rainbow. Layla shuffled in, still half asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. She climbed onto a stool and yawned. "Grandma, your phone was beeping last night." "I know," Janet said. "It was just a message." "From Mom?" Janet nodded once. Layla looked down at her spoon, stirring the oatmeal but not eating it. "Is she still mad?" Janet sat beside her, smoothing a strand of hair from the child's face. "She's still herself," she said. "And sometimes that means mad." Layla's brow furrowed. "Will she stop being mad?" Janet hesitated, then spoke softly. "She might not. But that's her problem to fix, not yours." The little girl nodded slowly, as if trying to understand an adult world that kept rewriting its rules. "You're not mad at her?" "I was," Janet said honestly. "But anger's like fire, good for clearing the weeds, dangerous if you hold it too long." Layla's eyes lifted, searching her face. "So, we're safe now?" Janet smiled faintly. "You'll stay safe." It wasn't just reassurance. It was a promise, signed and sealed in her tone. By afternoon, Victor arrived at the penthouse. His suit was crisp, his demeanor calmer than usual. But his eyes carried the satisfaction of someone tying off the last thread of a long case. He placed a slim folder on the counter. "It's done," he said. "The revised trust. Filed and notarized." Janet opened the folder, scanning the details. There it was. Clean, permanent, unassailable. Layla Grace Brooks, contingent beneficiary and primary occupant rights until age 21. "She'll never be displaced," Victor said quietly. "No one can touch the property or the trust, not even your son." I built in language so airtight it could survive a hurricane. Janet nodded, her fingers brushing the embossed seal. "Good. Then it'll outlast all of us." Victor leaned against the counter, studying her. "You did what most people only dream of. You rewrote the ending." Janet's lips curved, but her eyes stayed far away. "It was never about ending," she said. "It was about restoring what should have never been taken." He gave a short nod, then gathered his papers. "You know, legally speaking, we're at peace. But I'd still keep an eye on her. She's unpredictable when cornered." "I know," Janet said. "That's why I closed the door." That night, the sky turned bruised and restless. Thunder rolled somewhere far beyond the coast. Janet sat by the balcony doors, listening, not afraid, just alert. Layla slept soundly down the hall, her breathing steady. Janet's phone buzzed once more. Unknown number. She didn't answer. Instead, She placed it face down beside her, her reflection faintly visible in the dark glass. For the first time in years, she felt the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. The morning light over Miami was soft for once, filtered through thin clouds that turned the ocean pale silver. Janet stood at the balcony window, coffee in hand, watching the city stretch itself awake. For the first time in years, she felt no need to measure her breathing against the hum of the traffic or the weight of other people's noise. It was quiet, and it was hers. Behind her, Layla's laughter spilled from the hallway, light and unguarded. She came running into the room, still in her pajamas, clutching something wrapped in newspaper and tied with a pink ribbon that had clearly been rescued from a shoebox. "Don't look yet," she said, giggling as she hid it behind her back. "You have to sit down first." Janet turned, amused. "You're giving orders now?" Layla nodded solemnly. "Yes, it's a rule." Janet obeyed, settling into the armchair by the window. The sun caught the silver streaks in her hair as Layla bounced on her toes in front of her. "Okay," Layla said, placing the small bundle in Janet's lap. "Now you can open it." Janet peeled away the newspaper slowly, careful not to tear it. Inside was a small, gleaming keychain, a simple silver oval with soft edges. Engraved on it, in shaky cursive letters, were the words, "Hummo 1, Grandma." For a long moment she didn't speak. The sunlight caught the metal just right, reflecting a shimmer onto her palm. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't even new. But it was deliberate, chosen. Her throat tightened. "Where did you—" Layla smiled proudly. "There's a gift shop by the cafe where Miss Maria gets her coffee. I saved my allowance." Janet blinked quickly. Once. Twice. "You shouldn't have spent that on me." "I didn't spend it," Layla said. "I used it." Janet's breath caught in her chest. She looked down at the small charm again, its engraving a little off-center, imperfect in the most human way. Layla leaned against her knee. "You made this place home again, Grandma." Janet brushed a strand of hair from her granddaughter's forehead. "I just opened the door." Layla shook her head. "No, you fixed it." Maria appeared a moment later, balancing a tray of breakfast pastries and a steaming carafe of coffee. "Hope nobody's on a diet today," she said, setting it down with a flourish. "Cinnamon rolls cure all things legal and emotional." Janet chuckled softly. "That's a dangerous promise." Maria noticed the keychain glinting in Janet's hand. "Well, look at that," she said warmly. "A proper award for your new title." "It's perfect," Janet said, voice quieter now. Maria smiled and reached out, resting a hand on Janet's shoulder. "You've done it, you know. The noise is gone, the air's clear. You won." Janet looked out toward the window again, the waves glittering in the distance. "Winning's loud," she said. This is peace." Maria squeezed her shoulder gently. "The best kind." Janet nodded. "The best revenge is peace." Maria laughed softly. "That should be on a t-shirt." Just then, the elevator bell chimed. The sound was softer now. No longer alarming, just part of the rhythm of life returning. Victor stepped in a moment later, crisp as ever, holding a manila envelope tucked neatly under his arm. "I'm starting to feel redundant," he said, smiling faintly. "You've stabilized the building, rebalanced your accounts, and diffused 3 board disputes without me." "That was the idea," Janet replied. Victor handed her the envelope. "Final confirmation from the registry. You're now listed as sole and permanent owner of the property, with protection clauses for the next generation." Layla's eyes widened. "That means no one can ever take it?" "That's right," Victor said with a wink. "This penthouse belongs to your grandmother, and after that, to you." Layla gasped and looked up at Janet. "For me?" Janet nodded, her voice soft but sure. "For you." It's your anchor now. Victor smiled, the kind of professional satisfaction that only comes from closing a case worth more than any contract. Permanent ownership, he said, almost ceremonially. Janet held the keychain tight in her palm, feeling its cool weight against her skin. Funny, she murmured. Peace fits in the palm of your hand. As Victor and Maria gathered their things to leave, the penthouse filled with the gentle sounds of laughter and coffee cups, and the hum of Miami beyond the glass. The apartment didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt inhabited, alive. Janet stood for a moment by the window, her reflection merging with the skyline. Then she looked down at Layla, who was tracing her initials on the new bookshelf. The child turned up to her, smiling. "It's perfect here, Grandma." Janet's eyes softened. "It's exactly as it should be." The morning after the papers were finalized, Miami rose beneath a sheet of gold. The bay shimmered, restless but radiant, and the light poured through the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows like it was blessing the space anew. Janet moved slowly through her home, barefoot, coffee in hand, her reflection gliding across the polished floors. The scent of fresh lilies filled the air, Maria's doing, and somewhere down the hall, soft music drifted from the piano room. Layla sat at the keys, her small hands pressing uncertain notes, finding melody by accident. The tune was halting, hesitant, but beautiful in its honesty. "Keep going," Janet said softly as she passed the doorway. Layla grinned without looking up. "I'm making my own song." "You always did," Janet murmured. She crossed into the living room, where sunlight spilled across the rug. The old one, restored and returned, its deep navy threading grounding the bright white furniture that remained. The walls bore her family again. Wedding photos, Ethan as a boy, even one of Kelsey holding baby Layla, because even memory deserved a place, as long as it knew its boundaries. Everything gleamed, not with newness, but with balance. When the elevator chimed, Maria's voice floated down the hall before her feet did. "I brought muffins, and before you say anything, yes, they're full of sugar, and no, I don't regret it." Janet smiled, meeting her halfway. "I stopped believing in guilt years ago." Maria set the basket down, glancing around the penthouse with a small approving nod. "It's beautiful up here again. Peaceful. Feels like the building itself is breathing easier." "It should," Janet said, pouring her friend a cup of coffee. The noise finally left. Maria leaned on the counter, her eyes soft but sharp. "Funny how that happens when the right person's name is back on the title." Janet smirked faintly. "You make it sound like magic." "It's not magic," Maria said. "It's consequence." Before Janet could answer, the elevator dinged again. A taller shadow stepped out this time. Victor, in a slate-gray suit carrying a leather folder. "Good morning, ladies," he said, offering a polite nod. "Sorry to intrude. Thought I'd deliver this one myself." He handed Janet a sealed envelope, heavier than it looked. "Final registration copies. County office stamped and sealed. The penthouse, the trust, and your late husband's name, all reconciled." Maria raised a brow. "So this is really it? No more hearings, no more board meetings, no more legalese?" Victor's expression softened. "No one can touch it now." Janet traced a finger along the embossed edge of the documents. "That's what he wanted," she said quietly, "to make sure what we built stayed solid." Victor nodded. "He'd be proud." Janet looked around the room. The photos, the furniture, the quiet hum of Layla's piano from the other room. "They rented the illusion," she said finally. "I kept the title." Maria let out a small laugh, half admiration, half awe. "You always did know the difference." The day stretched slow and easy. Victor stayed for coffee, Maria teased him about his diet, and Layla's laughter occasionally floated in between the notes of her tune. Outside, The waves glittered against the glass, their rhythm as steady as breathing. When the afternoon light softened to amber, Victor stood to leave. "You know," he said, straightening his jacket, "most people fight to win. You fought to restore. It's rare." Janet's reply came without hesitation. "Winning fades. Restoration lasts." He smiled. "Well, consider it done." After they left, the penthouse grew quiet again. An earned quiet, not the lonely kind. Janet walked one more slow circle through the space, from the balcony where the ocean glared like silver glass, to the hall where the family portraits now watched with patient eyes. The piano fell silent. Then soft footsteps approached. "Grandma?" Janet turned. Layla stood there, her hair catching the late sun, holding the small silver keychain, the one that said, "Chaber 1, Grandma." "I finished my song," Layla said. "Do you want to hear it?" "Always." Layla sat back at the piano and began again. The tune was simple, unpolished, but full of warmth, like the building itself was humming along. Janet leaned against the doorway, closing her eyes for a moment, letting it sink in. The music, the peace, the permanence. When the last note faded, Layla came over and wrapped her arms around her grandmother's waist. Janet kissed the top of her head. "You made it all better," Layla whispered. Janet smiled, her voice barely above a breath. "We both did." The city outside glowed in shades of rose and gold. The air smelled faintly of salt and sugar and something softer. Home. Janet looked out over the balcony one last time, her reflection clear against the window, the skyline behind her, unbroken and hers again. Her voice, calm and certain, filled the room. "My DIL mocked me for coming back, until they learned who really owned the penthouse."